Ladies and gentlemen, people of the internet, my name is Udur Jigero and this is Dialogues with Jigero. Today we are talking with Ochuka about a story that I've always wanted to understand from inside out. You know, I have sat down, Mr. Ochuka, I have sat down with you several times. We have had long hours of conversation around this thing.
Yes.
And the last time we had a conversation, we were talking about pain. And obviously your pain is cancer pain. My pain has been what is called plantar fasciitis, which is, but I don't know if you've ever told your story before in a way that we want to dive into it today. And you were diagnosed with cancer in 2011, right?
Yes.
But there was a precursor. You called it a precursor. Yes. Of something that happened, something I would consider tragic. So perhaps the first thing I want to say is that happy birthday, my friend.
Thank you so much.
It's been a long journey, and one of the things I have always thought is that you are stronger than me, at least. And I think you're stronger than most people. And the fact that you were told by a doctor that your day on earth is coming to an end, I don't know how my reaction would be. But take me back. Your name is Omondi Ochuka.
Yes.
Are you going to say those other three names?
No.
Okay. Let's go to a little bit of you growing up.
Yes.
Yeah.
I grew up in a mixed setup. I grew up in the village and also in Nairobi and Kampala.
Yeah.
The reason being is my grandparents, towards the end of the approach of their retirement ages, they moved a lot. So practically moved back to the village where I spent the rest of my childhood, from between 5 and 10. Okay, that's the childhood age.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my growing up was beautiful. I think if I look back in terms of the things that I've experienced that are really tragic and terrifying, I usually say that my happiest years are below age of 12. Those years were filled with a family that was very large. We were many. My grandparents took in a lot of people, besides my uncles and my aunties. We were like around 15. And during school holidays, you can imagine how full the house was. But it was beautiful.
That is in Nyabondo.
Yeah, in Nyakat Nyabondo. So this thing was a beautiful experience, because I had my uncles who were way older than me, and some of them were almost my age, and some in the middle. So it was a complete holistic experience growing up, very happy and doing things together, family choirs, going to music festivals. We had a family choir, and I remember my grandfather used to play.
Which denomination is this? AIC?
This is AIC. So my grandfather used to play the guitar, and my uncle Freddie used to play the piano, and we used to sing. So I think it was a really mesmerizing experience growing up. Also farming together, it was just beautiful back then. I think also it's a privilege of nostalgia. When you look back, sometimes you imagine that growing up was better than life is now. But I think compared, life has its own merit, and it's unfair to compare them.
You told me about your grandfather teaching you how to type on the old rugged typewriter.
Yes.
Yeah, how is that feeling? How was that?
Typing, it was very funny. Back then we saw it as a punishment. When we used to, I remember when I was learning to rap, when I was learning to use a dubbing machine, we never knew which cassette to use. So I remember this one time when we dubbed our voices on Jim Reeves. If you remember, Jim Reeves was
I remember Jim Reeves very well.
Gospel artist.
Yeah.
So we dubbed our voices on Jim Reeves tape, and this was a treasured gospel record. And when he found out, he told us to write an apology letter on the typewriter.
Your grandfather?
Yes. We hadn't seen this thing. We used to just see it on his desk, but we had never used it. So we spent a month, because it had to be flawless. When you type, and then it's not like
it's not like
this one.
There's no erasing.
You have to go back and use another reel of paper. And those reels of paper used to go all the way to, I think, Swan Center back then in Kisumu to get it. So sometimes you not have any money or transport to go to Kisumu to buy, because the one you're given, you're only given 2 leaves, one for typing, and then the other one to make it meticulous. So it was a beautiful experience, because that way I immersed myself. We had a small study room that also dubbed as his own office. So typing was like a moment also that I got very close to him, picking his mind and just learning who he was. It was a beautiful, intimate moment.
He was an academic.
Yes. Yes.
Just like you.
Yes.
What's area of study?
He used to teach sociology.
Sociology. What is sociology?
Sociology is how people.
I understand.
It's a study of human behavior and society. The link between human behavior and society.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you got your way to Nairobi. At what point did you come to Nairobi?
Well, it was intermittently, because I remember also spending a major part of my childhood at is it Woodley? Woodley and Ayani. That's where also they lived for a long time.
This is who, your uncle, your father, your grandfather?
My grandparents. So it was intermittently. But when I permanently moved back to Nairobi to live with my uncle, it was in 2003. 2003, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so you moved to Nairobi to do, at what stage of schooling?
To Nairobi, and I was in Nairobi when I was in schooling. All through those years, I was in Nairobi. Only that at some point, my primary school I did in Nyabondo, so we had to travel because I was in boarding school, and then also high school I also had to do in Nyanza. So there was a lot of traveling between Nairobi and upcountry. Yes,
my cousin went to Nyabondo, and what I remember primary boarding. What I remember about him coming back home was that he spoke English flawlessly. And it was unbelievable that he was just there for 3 years, and he came back and
a changed man.
It's amazing what Nyabondo used to do to those.
Is it
those
Nyabondo
guys.
just good schooling, good education?
Well, yeah.
But they could go together.
So, guys were forced to speak in English, or what happened?
Yes. It was actually speaking mother tongue was actually prohibited. And we had a language policy, so that if you spoke mother tongue, you'd be sent back home, and you'd return as if you were reporting a new mattress and a new box. They track everything. So people dreaded that. And at some point, I remember one very particular interesting thing. We used to call it KQ. We used to fly over the fence to go and buy mandazi and those we call it nyamogo. There's a very good avocado. It's very sweet. When it used to come from Chabera. So that avocado, if you put it in Githeri, it was the best meal you could ever have within the school. But that language policy and in terms of strengthening classroom work, I think it changed us in so many ways.
I want us to get into the story of finally you are a young man with a bright future. And things suddenly go awry. Of course, we talked about it outside this interview, and you told me a story of. You didn't tell me how you fell in love with that lady.
I did not.
Yeah, I would be happy to hear how you fell in love with the daughter of this
diplomat.
Yeah, tell me about it, and then I think we are going into the story of the what about this lady and what happened after that. And I think in that year, that is when a lot of things happened. You told me that in 1 year
there was a packed year,
full of beautiful things, full of horror stories, terrifying things.
Yes.
Yeah. So please tell me about meeting this lady and how it grew to the point and how you got to realize that she was suffering from this disease and getting pregnant and her getting pregnant with your child and all this, impactful year.
I had a friend, my friend's mom called Miss Lency. So Miss Lency used to work as a nurse at Mata. So one day we went to visit with my friend Kevin. And I met this beautiful lady, And he's asking, so what happened? Are you guys here sick? Are you seeing your mom? So she thought that Kevin's mom is both our mom, that we were brothers. And she was kind of right, because we sort, some people say we look very much alike with Kevin.
Kevin is your cousin?
No, we're just friends.
Ah.
Yeah, we're just friends. But I think also maybe if you've stayed longer with somebody, you start to look together.
That's what they say of couples.
Yes. So after that, she invited me. She was an intern at UN Gigiri, where her mother was also a diplomat there. She invited me to a caucus. There was I think there was a student caucus, and students were invited from all over East Africa to attend this caucus in UN Gigiri. And I think when we were just learning to talk with each other, I was such a recluse. I am still a very reserved person. Until
That's why it's interesting to me that you're the one that was invited and not Kevin.
The things of the heart, I guess.
Yeah.
So she invited me to this caucus, and the more we talked, the more I think there was a liking and inclination towards each other. She was 2 years older than me. At that time, I was in high school. She was in college, in her second year.
She was 2 years older than you.
Yeah, she was 2 years older than me. So I think also in terms of humanity, when somebody is afar, you admire them for what you see. But when you bring them closer, you get to realize their humanity. Like what you were saying when we started, inside out. Now you're approaching this person from inside out. And I think that is one of the things that brought us together, that the fact that we saw, we connected intellectually.
What was her name?
She's called Nikki.
Nikki.
Yes. So I think I can't clearly demarcate where I fell in love with Nikki, but it was a culminating process, because I doubt love comes softly for me. For most people, it can be an outburst. You fall in love and you're crazy and you're proposing, but mine came softly. Just getting to understand each other. But I would say that the year that I fell in love with her was in 2008. Yeah, so now that time I'm in year 3 high school, but there was of course a lot of trying to step back, because I'm a minor and she's not. So even conversations have boundaries. Yeah, she was very, very, very particular in terms of she used to mock me about it. You get older fast because I'm older than you. There's a thing that when a woman is older than you, they keep on reminding you about it.
Is it coming from their own guilt of dating a child?
Yes, I think, because in reverse, it's very proper for a man to date a younger woman. It's the thing that happens half the time. But when it's the other way around, there's usually it's atypical. So I think we went fully in when I turned 18, and this is now 2010. Yes.
Okay. And what the parents knew about it?
Yes, they did. We were friends. We were friends for a long time, family friends. We used to go stay at their house. They used to come stay at my uncle's. So it was built on also that foundation that our families were also friends. Yes.
A lot of modern people and friendships and dating, they visit their mother-in-laws, in quote unquote, a lot, and they play, and the mother knows that this is my daughter's boyfriend.
Yes.
That doesn't happen a lot in conservative cultures.
Yes.
Like in Luo. How was this like?
It was different, because first of all, the idea of introducing a girlfriend to now my grandparents, I couldn't imagine it. I remember when my Uncle Freddie had a crush, and she was in I think Moi Girls, and I used to sneak his letters to him, and it was unthought of. Like, you could sneak a letter without your grandparents realize, because if they did, it would be punishable. I think there was a lot of fencing in dating. This is a no-go zone. Don't do that. And maybe that is a culture of conservative and well-knit societies, that certain things are only move to the next when you're older. There is an agency. There's an agency that your parent holds over you, and they're the ones to give you. They don't give you like so. It's about time. It's not directly most of the time. It's usually implied. Now you're older, you should build a Simba and bring somebody home. Now you're given an okay. But during when you're waiting, there's no education, there's no sex education, there's no talks about relationships. And if somebody, I remember when our village crashes used to come home to buy milk. We used to have dairy cows. And when they come, they find you probably bathing in the evening in twilight. And you run all the way because you're scared. You're scared of your village crush seeing you naked. And then the following day they'll tell you, I saw you naked. They're like, no, you did not.
No, you did not.
But these are things you're learning on your own. Nobody sits you down and tells you, at this time, you're actually experiencing poverty. You'll be interested in girls. You'll be feeling things in your body. Nobody tells you that.
No one tells you.
Yeah, so it was very beautiful to see that there are families who actually bring their children very closer, and they want to know, who are you seeing? Are you just friends? Are you interested in each other? Are you having sex?
And this was Cindy's Nikki's family.
Yeah, Nikki's family. So it was a beautiful transition from what I knew. And I think it taught me a lot in terms of how to unlearn certain things, also integrate, because you can't completely unlearn what you grew up with. They become what are called value systems. They become your value systems, how you transact life, how you navigate life. So I think it was a beautiful thing for me. And
then that year, things happened.
Yeah. That year, a lot happened.
Which year was it?
This is 2010. So 2010, Nikki got pregnant. I did not know about it until she was 5 months. The reason why I remember when we visited, Nikki is Rwandese. They had not been to Rwanda for a long time. They were moved out of Rwanda because of genocide, the family. So when we went back to Rwanda, I remember when Rwanda is very beautiful. You've been to Rwanda. Scenic, it's beautiful. So we were sitting on the porch and just at night looking at the Rwandan nightlife. And she's telling me, I need to tell you something. And she broke the news that she's pregnant. So here I am. I'm underage. And I have a pregnant girlfriend who's older than me. And my girlfriend is also sickle celled. She suffers from sickle cell anemia. So we don't know what's happening. And she tells me, I think I want to keep the pregnancy. And I'm like, what do I do with this? Two things happen. One, I grew up knowing that I would be child-free. I never wanted to have a child. And then two, I also never imagined that I would, because if I got a girl pregnant, the next thing I would do is to marry them. So I already anticipated now that my girlfriend is pregnant, it means that I'm going to marry them and I have to do it sooner. But I'm not yet even in college. My life is not even started. So there's a lot of confusion in that. But there's also a lot of joy and anticipation and excitement. I'm a father. I'm going to be a father. So it was funny because this conversation happened after confrontation. We went to the hospital, one of our regular ER outpatients. And while she was in the dressing room, the doctor comes and says, I don't think she's going to carry the pregnancy to full term. So I'm like, what's happening? Wait a minute. Are you talking to me or you're talking to another wrong person? It's like, it's you. But
she already told you in Rwanda that she's pregnant.
No, this is before that conversation happened. This conversation happened as a confrontation for what happened in the hospital. So I asked her, I confront her. So what was the doctor saying about pregnancy or something like that? And like, yeah, I'm pregnant. I'm 5 months pregnant and I'm keeping it. And I was confused and I was terrified because one, the doctors already know, given her history with sickle cell, she might not make it carry the pregnancy to full term. And another confusion happens. She's pregnant not just with one child, they're twins. Shit. So
please be a cameraman.
So it gets intense. It gets intense, and I'm wondering, what do I do with all these things that are happening all together at once? And I'm like, okay, I'm an honorable man. I will be there for you, and we will walk this together. One thing lingers in my mind. I remember, I don't know whether this is there three very stigmatized diseases. One is HIV/AIDS when we were growing up. I don't know whether it was the case for you. And then 2 is ndulme or seizures. Yeah. And then 3 is sickle cell or any blood disorder. So these 3 diseases, when we were growing up, they were very stigmatized. In fact, many people said sickle cell, you can't past 18 or around 20s, you can't pass it.
My brother was sickle cell.
Yes.
Had sickle cell and he died under 10.
Yes. So it many people don't survive it, and because back then there was very little diagnostic tools to even drugs to manage the symptoms and like pain and all that. So I was terrified. I knew, is it a clocking thing? Am I put on clock with my girlfriend and I'm just getting to know her, and now we have a child. We have 2 children now. So we were lucky. We carried not she did. I did carry the pregnancy.
That's what they say.
Yes,
we are pregnant.
Yeah, so we were pregnant and we carried the pregnancy for 8 months, which was a lucky shot in the arm. Our daughters were born premature. They are called preemies. I think they call them preemies these days. And this now is the entry of a tragic story. My elder daughter, called Myra, Myra is stillborn. When stillbirth happens, you're born dead. So the other, we named them, our daughters, we named them after our grandmothers. Our grandmother was called Myra. And my great-grandmother was called Awur. So Awur survives. Awur was the younger one. Awur survives, but she has to go to the nursery, the neonatal care. That means there was only a brief moment of grief and joy intertwined together. You're holding your dead daughter, and you're holding one that is very feeble, soon whisked away to the nursery. And you're wondering, you have another girl who is sick and who has just given birth. And you're very young. Nobody prepares you for such. It's just like an abrupt interruption of life, and you're thrown into it. I think it's Christopher Hitchens that says something about thrownness. When you're born, you're thrown into the world, into existence. Nobody gives you a manual. Nobody gives you a template. There's nothing. You freestyle. You improvise as you go. So I'm here. I think that is one of the most intense moments I've ever experienced in life. And transitioning from that, from organizing the burial, from discharge and cremating the little child, it was terrifying. It was terrifying for me. But I count myself lucky because the family was very supportive, especially on Nikki's side. This time, I'm a bit hesitant to introduce Nikki to my family, because of course what I've mentioned before, but also because of personal discretion. I thought that it would be too soon to introduce it, because it's a big thing for me to take a girl home, a woman home, and tell my Dani, I brought Nikki, I've brought my woman. This will be my woman, and this is my child. So I had to really introspect deeply and organize how we travel home, and
for fairness, yes, for fairness to the audience, yes, watching this, yes, and since they started watching,
yes,
you've talked about your grandmother, you've talked about your grandfather, you've talked about your uncles, you haven't talked about your mother, you haven't talked about your father, yes, your biological father. And I think it is this time to tell the audience that this is another story.
Yes.
And they should understand that we are not talking about this, right?
not today. But I would probably make a remark. I grew up knowing that my grandparents were my parents.
Yeah.
I was born to a young mother, and she was in college during that time. And when she was enrolled back to college, now my grandmother became my mother. So even in terms of, you know how you become aware? You become aware and you realize that's mama. I became aware and I was pointing at my grandmother as my mother. In fact, even today, even my own mother knows that I called my grandmother mother. So I obviously didn't know who my biological father is. I still do not know, and it's a story that I think we will shoot another episode to dive extensively into it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So the burial dies down. The story continues.
It does. It does. I think during that time now I'm transitioning from high school to college. I didn't mention the date where she gave birth on 15th of February. A day after Valentine's. It was very iconic both at the same time, her being very sentimental, and I think also I have my sentimental side. So it was a very beautiful moment for us, but also tragic on the sense of loss and grief. But our families were very supportive, and we just navigate slowly by slowly. They say with grief you get a new name. Yeah, you get a new name. That's like when people get saved, they say in Luo, so you're now I'm now a father, and she's a mother, and somebody will call me dad, hopefully someday soon. It's beautiful, and it's I think one of the things that saved me, and I usually think this is the reason why people have children, because a child anchors you. It's like kind of like this heavy anchor that your ship is sinking, but you're steady, you're just floating. So sometimes I would hold her, and during that time, I'm living alone during my first year, and most of the time Nikki used to spend at my place. So I spend a lot of time with my daughter. Given the background that I have, I raised practically most of my younger cousins. So things like taking care of a baby, that's something I'm very good at. And it was a luck. I think I was fortunate to have had such a background, because now my girlfriend was sick most of the time, so I have to take care of two people, and you also struggling with school. And so school comes I think. Back then, we used to wait for 2 years. When during job, we used to wait for 2 years before you join college. So when school comes we joined in September 27th, 2011. Now things get hard, because now I have to juggle with school and a young daughter and a sickling girlfriend. But I was happy, because that is as far as the difficulty a new life had dispensed on me. It was not until Nikki died. Nikki died 5 months after she gave birth. So this is July, and suddenly the light that you see when you have a lover, you have a wife. I don't know whether it's the case for you. It's just something. It's like the scent of a. Have you watched the movie The Scent of a Woman? It hypnotizes you, but also there's a healing aura in having somebody who loves you and you love back. So when they're snapped away from you, and not soon after you had just lost your first daughter, it's life clarifying, but it pulls a cord out of your existence, a very vital cord. So I'm grappling with that. And also the other thing that made it very difficult, I'd never attended a cremation ceremony. In fact, I had only just read it in books, in Buddhist books, or with the Hindus. I had never even imagined that one day I would see it happen, to me especially. So I imagined that there would be a process of a burial, of a committee and all that, but there wasn't something like that. There was only, of course, there's the preparation, and soon after her body was cremated. And
do you remember how do they do it? What do you see as the relative of a loved one?
There's of course
all I see is a bonfire.
Yeah, that's the end final product. But what happens is a funeral just happens the way it does happen in any other culture. There's a eulogy. There's a meeting of close family members. I remember we went to All Saints for the
Missa.
Yeah, for the Missa. And then we had a brief reception at their home in Karen. That's where we gathered as small neat family members, and then we went to the crematorium in is it Kariako or where? Is it Kariako?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of them in the city.
Yes,
I think
yes.
the Kariako is the biggest one.
Yes, so
or the most famous.
Yes, so all these things happen, but that now what is different? The interment is different now. Instead of a burial or a graveyard, there's you sit there and there's the incinerator and you say your last wishes. I used to feel like it was the easiest thing to do, and I think it has sort of informed some of my biases, because I also would love to be cremated. I would not want to be buried in the traditional sense of burial. But you just sit there and you say your last wishes, and they're pushed towards the incinerator.
With a coffin?
No, not without the coffin. Just with their clothes on, yeah. Yes. The coffin.
And you watch them. I imagine the word is burning. You watch them burn.
No, you don't. It's closed.
You don't see the fire.
You don't see the fire. You only see the fire. It's very bright and blazing. You only see it when they're being pushed. After that, that small window is closed, so you don't see anything else.
So you don't see smoke. You don't see anything.
No, you don't.
It's electricity fire, or it's
yes, it was an incinerator.
Incinerator. Okay. So you're left.
So I'm left, a young person.
Yeah, with your child.
Yeah. I was tormented by life. I was tormented, and you see, these things happen to people way older. That is what I imagined. That many people I saw, even back in the village or even around the communities or places I had lived in, people who lost their wives or their husband, they're way older, 40s, 50s, or even 60s. That's when you become a widow or a widow.
Unless it is an accident, but mostly they go when you are way older.
Yes.
You have your own children and they're grown up and things like that. And even when you're mourning, you have a lot of people mourning around you.
Yes. So I'm also even wondering, am I a widower or something? Because we were not married.
You are not married, but I wonder how the in-laws treated you.
Oh.
What did they treat you as an in-law? Did they treat you as the boyfriend? Did they treat you as the father of their grandchild? What was the treatment like?
It was, I think, for them it was certain that we were. I think they treated me as the husband. There was no difference between me as a boyfriend, a husband, or just somebody who was dating their daughter. I was more like their son, and that, I think, that made that period at least bearable, because I imagine if there was a lot of isolation, a lot of you were dating our daughter, you were not part of us. If that would have happened, it would have been really tormenting for me. But I really appreciate the fact that they brought me closer, and they treated me as one of them, and they were really, really supportive throughout that period. But that period of support didn't last, because soon after, in 2011, on November 11th, I collapsed after class. And
the same year?
The same year. I collapsed after class. And the ambulance, I remember how hazy, dreamlike it was moving, the school ambulance to Aga Khan. On a Friday, you know the jam that happens, the traffic. And back then, the Globe Cinema was just bad. So we're going to Aga Khan. My friend Farah and Dana, they were like rushing after the ambulance. I think that's the last concrete memory I remember. I just remember holding I had some headphones. I think they were by Dr. Dre. I had a very neat afro back then. So I remember feeling dizzy and some rush of a fever coursing through me. And I told Farah, I remember telling Farah that I feel thirsty. And then the next thing I remember, I think they were trying to follow up, running after the school ambulance. In between there's just some gap. I don't remember. I don't know what happened. I just remember that I woke up the following day. I'm in an environment that is strange and different, but it looks like a hospital. And soon after, the nurse that was on station comes and says, "Hey, just relax. You were brought here by your friends from the university. What's your name?" And then I'm trying to tell her, "Are you asking my name to know if I have forgotten it?" I tell her, "My name is Omondi, so where am I?" She's telling me, "You are at Aga Khan Hospital, Nairobi." And like, you were brought here, you had a convulsion yesterday, you've been unconscious since then. So let's call the doctor and we'll give you a brief of what has happened or what we are currently doing. We do not know what has caused your convulsion, but you do not look good at all. I'm like, no, I've been fine. I've been fine all along. Why are you saying? So I thought that because there's a way, grief is kind of like a sickness. Grief manifests even physically. When you're grieving, sometimes you don't eat, you don't bathe, you have malaria, but when you go to the hospital, there is no malaria. So I felt maybe that is what they're talking about.
You felt that this grief is coming from the loss of your girlfriend and the loss of your child.
Yes, I did not know that soon another thing would crop up. So the doctor tells me, "You look jaundiced. Do you know what that means?" And I say, "Yeah." Am I yellow? I'm like, I'm looking at my skin and it just looks fine, because I think there's also the bias of self. You do not see yourself the way another person sees you. So they tell me we are running a couple of tests, but the ones we've done, the ultrasound looks like your liver has lesions. It's kind of like it's blistered, it's unhealthy, and it's distended. When a liver is distended, it's kind of like it's bulging, it's swollen. And you look like you've also lost weight. So these things are just symptoms like any other, but until we have all the conclusive results of the tests and the scans that we've done, we cannot speculate. That word annoyed me. What do you mean speculate? I want the answers, because I was tired of being...
They sort of know what is going on.
Yes.
But they are saying that we don't want to speculate.
Yes. In fact, they're asking me, do you have somebody we can call who can come to be with you? And I'm telling like, I'm okay. I can handle it. And like, Sawa, we'll do the results. I think they will come tomorrow or the day after on Monday. The results came and I have liver cancer. Mm. And I'm wondering, did you do the tests okay? Ask them. Did you do the tests okay? Could you do them again? Could you do them again so that we can confirm? It's like, yes, we have. It's a pensive one. Mm. I remember Aga Khan has this very beautiful brick walls. I moved the curtain. I was looking at how people, it was in the evening, people were moving. Some are probably leaving for after their visiting hours were done. Maybe some are changing shifts. I imagine in my head. I moved the curtain. Nairobi was hanged in some very, very false grey. False, not too grey, not too white. Mm. So life is happening, and I'm wondering, what are these? What are these? I think I remember having read this book by Joan Didion, The Year of Magical Thinking, and she was documenting how her family went through tremendous changes all in the same time. A sick husband, the death of her daughter. And I was wondering, is this the same thing that is happening to me?
So in 1 year, you get the news that you're expecting twins.
Yeah.
But of course, you already knew that Nikki was sick.
Yes.
But then you lose Nikki this year. You have your twins, and then you're diagnosed with cancer of the liver.
Yes.
The same year. And so, you remember I asked you, what is cancer? Because you told me that it's not like HIV.
No, it is not. But they share some striking similarities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then there is staging.
Yes.
Cancer staging. And what exactly is cancer?
Well, cancer is a funny disease. Cancer comes from Latin, cacaras. Cacaras, I told you yesterday, that it's a
crab.
It's a crab. So a crab has tentacles for its is it called phalanges? The legs, we would call them. So that also is the same way cancer operates, in that it begins as a mass of tumor, a mass of malignant cells, and then it spreads to other parts of the body, or the organ under which the primary site under which it was diagnosed. So that is also why many people, like the author who wrote The Emperor of All Maladies, Siddhartha, Mukherjee. He says that cancer is the emperor of all maladies. An emperor is as a ruling, is a king. It's the king of all maladies. I think he means that cancer has a terrifying trope to it, in the sense, in the way it eats the body, in the way it spreads to the body, in the way it is hard to diagnose, in the way it has this back and forth. So I think when people ask me what cancer is, I think many doctors will also tell you that it is not one disease. And that is also why it mostly people also liken it with HIV. It's a group of diseases, But what becomes cancer is a mass. It's a mass of malignant cells. I also mentioned off camera that cells can be divided into three, or let's say broadly two. So we have the good cells. The good cells are a cell that is healthy, that performs biological functions in a proper way, in the way that it's supposed to do. It replicates, it passes information, it does what a cell does. And then we have the malignant cells, which yes, they still conduct their business, but sometimes they do err. And let's say when they multiply abnormally, and then they accumulate into mass that becomes a tumor. So that is a bad cell. So there is a good cell and a bad cell. And this also, when I was learning about my cancer, I read a lot extensively when my cancer diagnosis came, trying to understand what is this? This is something I used to read in my home, in our home library, but now I'm experiencing it. I did realize that like illness has a way of disrupting the dichotomy of health. Because when you are healthy, you are either healthy or unwell, either sick or not sick. That is what most people know. In fact, when somebody looks at you, they will not think, Jagero, like if you were to go to your daughter's school and they tell you guys have to run for your daughter to win a prize, do you think you'll win that prize?
No,
you won't, because you can't run for shit, and that is funny, because when we grow up, I look at you, I do not know what you're going through, because for me, illness as a narrative means that I have to see somebody really sick in the hospital, or their bones protruding, or they're vomiting, or something like that. But then you realize that these things could be very silent and subtle in the way it operates, even in the way that it came for me as a diagnosis. Because illness, my cancer diagnosis, separated my life from a time when I was just a normal college kid. Yes, I was grieving, I was a father, but then I was not sick, I imagined. That is what I usually call the precursor, because it separates the life when I was sick and when now I am a cancer patient. I have a new name. And cancer comes with a lot of questioning, a lot of where is the stage? Because when I got the diagnosis, I only had the diagnosis. They had not done the staging. Staging requires extensive tests and scans. And staging are done by oncologists when they do tumor marker tests to determine the name for your cancer, because cancers are different. Cancer affects all types of the body, very many types of the body. And even within the liver, there are so many types of liver cancer.
Really?
Yes. So like I told you yesterday, liver cancer, most people tend to separate it into two also. There's the cirrhotic and non-cirrhotic liver cancer. Cirrhotic is liver as you know it. There's this meme that usually flies around when people say unachoma maini, for those who when unakata maji. So when they usually imagine when you are a heavy drinker, then it affects the liver, it burns the liver. When a liver is burned, you see the texture. Liver is very smooth. For those who've eaten liver, it's very smooth and very silky, velvety. It's very smooth. But a diseased liver is blistered. It has lesions on it. So a liver usually happens that when it gets cirrhosis, maybe or you are infected with hepatitis B virus, and then it advances to a liver disease. It could cause liver cancer. But then there's also the non-cirrhotic, which means you don't have any predisposing factor, like you've never drunk, you've never used recreational narcotic drugs. So it could either be a genetic things or family history or just another disease approaching you. So for me, I remember the difficulty it was for the doctors to try, because they imagined that it was a lifestyle related thing for me. So they were asking me, do you drink? Have you been drinking? Have you been smoking? Have you smoked in your life? I was like, no. They were trying to rule out what could have been the cause for my cancer. And it was even tormenting for me because I was now looking back in terms of what caused my cancer, or where did it come from, and what is the name. The tests came later. I remember I requested for a discharge on 12th of November. I went back to my cubicle in Hall 11. We had a very small cubicle in University of Nairobi. And that evening, I went to the terraces of University Sports Ground.
Who am I?
Yeah, I'm looking at Museum Hill. Museum Hill had a fascinating traffic during the evening. And
it still has, I believe.
It still has. And it's contrasted by the bustling activities of students, playing football. Some are running, some are going to Chiromo for their evening classes. It's just it's a contrast that is happening. I'm very scared. I want to call my grandmother, but I'm skirting. I start the phone call, so we are talking about
They haven't released the news to the the family.
They haven't. So I am skirting around. They are asking us, did it rain? All those small talks. Did it rain? I'm like, no, rain has not been here for a while. How are you? Things are fine. Things are fine. Later I want to tell her, there's a report that is coming tomorrow. I need you to travel to this evening. I'm sending you some money. So I need you to travel this evening so that at least we can go find out what the doctor is saying together. I'm like, are you sure? Kuna manani weekend, just take peace. So the following day, we go to the boardroom. I remember they had some lights like this.
You on insurance?
Yes, I still had insurance covered by both her insurance and my mother's. And I also had NHIF. So they put a scan on some it's against a light, a backdrop of a light. So they're trying to crunch. And as statistic people, you're crunching your data. This is what we found. You see in this place, they're pointing with the marker pen. This is the tumor, and this is the tumor. It's the place called hepatic portal vein. Hepatic portal vein is a very crucial vein. The liver is very rich in networks of blood supply. So hepatic portal vein is one of the vital vessel in it. And the tumor was very close to it. So that meant that my cancer was inoperable. That means we could not operate on it at that time. And that adds to the difficulty of my diagnosis. And that also gives a name of hepatocellular carcinoma. That is the cancer that I was diagnosed with in 2011.
What is it in English?
It's HCC.
HCC. Just call it HCC.
Yeah, just call it HCC. But just call it primary liver cancer. It's the most common. It's funny because HCC is very common for people who are 60 years of age, according to statistics. I'm a 19-year-old. I'm only 19. So I'm wondering, what are these odds? What are these odds that I'm meeting? It seems my life is a consequence of meeting odds after odds after odds. But they tell me, it's okay. The doctor encourages me. By the way, cancer can happen. It doesn't have to have a cause. And sometimes there are outliers of people who get diagnosed outside of what medical journals say. And he says that maybe you fall under that outlier. I say, it's okay. So what do we do, doc? He says, we would like to start chemotherapy very soon, so that combination of chemotherapy and radiation therapy. These are two very common. Most people know when you're going through cancer treatment, it's usually chemo. I was like, are you having chemo? Yeah, I'm having chemo. But there's quite a lot in terms of, and it also depends with the type of cancer you have, the stage you have.
Which types of treatments do they give apart from chemotherapy?
There's chemo, there's radiotherapy, there's also brachytherapy, there's what they call nowadays immunotherapy, there's also precision medicine where they use, laparoscopy, a very special camera, and they watch your body, and then they do what is called seeding. They seed a radioactive pellet to the site of the tumor. It is imagined that this pellet will shrink the tumor. So it's a small, ultra-modern surgery that happens. So there's a lot of things that have. It could also be immunotherapy. It could also, in terms of diet and complementary alternative medicine, all that. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that happen besides chemo, but chemo is the most known. So they go into staging. How they did the staging? They did the liver function test. They did a comprehensive blood work. They did another MRI, I think. And they come with all that, and that's how they found out I was staged 2. That was lucky, because like I told you off camera, and I've told a lot of people about this before. Liver cancer, for the most part, is usually found out when it is late stage or end of life stage, when the doctors cannot do much about it. And that is why the doctor said I was lucky, because I had a fighting chance. Only that the fighting chance was complicated by the fact that it was not operable. Otherwise, we would have probably had a resection or a transplant.
What's a resection?
A resection is when they cut the part of the liver that is affected by tumors. As many people know, but for those who do not know, a liver can grow back just like a lizard's tail. When that part is cut, it can grow back. So that is what's called a resection. A transplant is the complete. You have a donor who gives you, probably harvested from another dead person. So you have a donor, a liver donated to you, and then they do a surgery. They insert the new liver, and then you go through immunotherapy. You go through what is called anti-rejection therapy medicine. So that because a new organ has been introduced in your body. In other words, you're 2 people living in the same body. So sometimes the body goes rogue, and you're wondering, so who's inside here? I want to kick you out. Is that like a bad roommate? This is not us. Yeah, this is not us.
A bad roommate.
Yeah. You know, those roommates that you live with, they're usually very dirty. They don't wash their dishes. They wanakupiga exile. So you want to date. Yeah, that's kind of like cancer, man. Yeah. So that would have been the case were my liver operable. So we had to do a back and forth chemotherapy to shrink the tumor, so that at least I'm allowed the respite of having a resection or a transplant, according to what the doctors would find out later. It wasn't a very easy thing, because I took I think 1 month and some weeks just digesting this thing. In fact, I almost never wanted to start treatment. I was tired already. I was just tired by life. And I later on just decided, let me just do this. It's a fighting chance. Once in it, you are in it. So I start chemo. It's a long journey. It goes into 2012. 2012 was a very dark year. You know how you go to class and things are happening for people. There's a lot. Back then, student politics was very heightened. I was very charismatic back then. I got my shot at student politics. But now, all of a sudden, people don't see you in class. And if they see you, your frame, wanasemaga frame, for the red pillars. But this is a different frame. This is now your physical frame. I lost 17 kgs in 3 months. So you obviously, I was very plumpy in first year. I was very plumpy.
Because I remember losing 10 and people were saying how badly I looked.
Yes.
So losing 17, I imagine, is a lot.
Yes. And then there was this day, I don't know, for most people who went to public universities, the washrooms are terrible. You know, so there's this time, and it used to be cold showers. I go to the washroom, and I'm washing my hair, and so I do this. The hair comes off, and what the fuck? I'm dying. My hair is falling. I knew these things would happen, but not this soon. So when I do this just falls. My afro, you see.
What makes this happen to cancer patients? What is it with cancer in the hair?
The cancer in the hair, it's a very interesting phenomenon, because like one thing that makes treating cancer very hard is the fact that, for example, chemotherapy, which is commonly used to treat many cancers, chemotherapy scientists have not discovered a way to discriminate between the good and the bad cells that I said earlier. So when they introduce chemotherapy, is chemicals. It's kind of like when you're having or drawing a blood, or when ukiongeza maji, it's the same thing. So, but the only difference now, they have the regimen, the chemo regimen. It's chemicals. So when they introduce this chemical to your body, sometimes it fails to discriminate between a good and a bad cell. So it just inafieka ikienda. So that is what happens. And we know cells like, hair is just a collection of dead cells. So sometimes that is the first casualty. Sometimes weight loss, because the tissues are under stress. You don't eat well. There's a lot of vomiting and nausea. So when you don't eat well, it means you can't retain food, and also you can't replenish the energy and the nutrients that your body needs. So obviously your frame goes off. So that is what happens with chemotherapy, and that's also what causes the hair to fall off. It mostly happens with women, and also because women hold a lot of pride in their hair, but some men also have it. Not as common as it happens with women. Yeah. So that is the first time I came very closely to mortality. The fact that my body as I knew it is no longer the same. It's now a battlefield. And I knew the side effects of treatment are kicking in. And it terrified me. One, because the afro was an identity for me. There are things that make you identify as
you had an afro.
Yes. It identifies you for who you are. It makes you who you are. In fact, many people can even identify you with it. So when I realized that this thing is going off, and people are telling me, hey bro, umekat weight sana, what's happening? Are you okay? I was like, I'm fine. Na mbona ukujagi daro these days? And like, nitakuja. So this time I moved back to live I think that time I was staying in Hurlingham, because now I wanted to stay with my daughter. This is another thing that was very difficult. It was very hard, because my daughter is very young, needs a lot of special care, but I am adamant and very stubborn about it. I felt like my girlfriend's family were not being fair to me, but I think they were considerate, because I was sick now.
You had already broken the news to them.
Yes. And I insist that I need to live with my daughter. It was a bit challenging, but I remember when one day I went to take her to the clinic. I took her to the clinic, and I met this lady called Mrs. Wasike. Mrs. Wasike was a janitor at Nairobi Hospital. So I took my daughter to the clinic, and I meet this lady, like, hey, you're very young. Are you a single dad? I don't know whether that thing is written on your face when you're a single dad. You just know it. Like, yes.
Obviously, it is weird when they see you running around with a child. And they're wondering, where is the mother?
Yeah. So I told her, no, but I used to have a friend called Odi Ward, actually. It was a taxi guy. This guy was very, very instrumental during those years, because I used to commute to school and also clinics, and sometimes when we used to go to the park with my daughter, hanging her on my front chest. So Odi tells her, no, this guy, you should meet him. You should meet him. So that's how we met with Mrs. Wasike. So Mrs. Wasike later became my help. When I was in school or when I was going through treatment, she held that space, and it made it easier for my girlfriend's family to see that the welfare of a ward was catered for. But something would happen in June when I went into coma. I was admitted for 2 weeks, and then I went into a coma. This coma lasted 43 days. In fact, a lot of people never knew I was going to make it out of that. When I woke up, two things contrasted me. My grandmother loves to sing Amazing Grace, go no. Sometimes it annoys me, but yes. But it also fills me with a lot of
It's very deathly.
Yes, it's very deathly. It's a grievous song.
Yeah, but it's not for grieving.
No, it's not. It's for comfort and grace.
Yes.
Grace.
Yes.
Amazing grace.
Yes. It's actually a very happy song.
Yes, it is.
Because it is actually it's very close to Kutendereza song.
Yes. It's actually a variant of it.
Yes. So you know that song?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a variant of it. And my grandmother is singing there. I first noticed a glimmer. It's faint when you're coming into awareness after having been into a coma. You don't notice things firsthand. They come in phases, blurry as you regain your consciousness. 43
days in the ICU.
Yes. So
did you dream? I hear it's just a loop of dreaming.
Yeah, it's a loop of dreaming. It's a lot of. I used to dream of my childhood days. It's like Halcyon childhood days.
Is that what you think keeps you from being alive? The loops in dreaming and just the body trying to function normally, but in another world.
Yes. That is also the other thing with cancer. Like I told you before, it gives you a new name. So you're introduced into a new world where you have to not do things the same way you used to do them. But we are known, and this is also the projection of the society or life as we know it, that life goes from one stage to another. But now, when an illness comes, it disrupts that linearity of life. You have to do things differently. And that's kind of like dreaming, because you have a contrast of parallels. You have the life that you imagine you are supposed to live, and then you have the life that now you have to face. So I was in this vegetative state, constantly in a loop of very vague memories. Maybe a child running, maybe a flower with my grandfather. Sometimes I would hear very far off noises. But I imagine that
do you still connect to your surroundings? Do you hear?
No, I don't. For my case, I don't. But other people who have had, for example, near-death experiences, like if you read this book by this Nomaji, I think I don't remember the other name. Nomaji. She wrote a book called "Dying to Be Alive." She's a cancer patient who survived quite almost the same things that I've survived, and also radically cured her cancer without even having to go through treatment. So there's a chapter where she's describing the time in coma, and she remembers how people were talking. She explains it in what many I don't want to call them hippies, but let's use that word for today. Hippies call OBE, out of the body experience. It's kind of like you're observing your body. It's like you're in an altered plane of your body. You're watching people, you're watching yourself. Sometimes you feel like parts of you are separated by an ethereal film between you and your body. It's like a spiritual realm. So for me, I think I don't remember much. It was hazy, but I remember occasional loops of memories. But I think that heightened towards the time when I was beginning to be conscious. And my grandmother says I would do this, I would move my hand, and when they would call me, Jadu, okay, then I would do this. So that would mean that I'm there, somewhere in there. She used to say that is how she knew I was somewhere in there, when I would move my hand like I'm listening or something. But I don't remember much. It's kind of like a blank slate of very dreamlike state. Yeah, so that coma was also very instrumental in the landscape of my life in 2012. And coming out of it was a huge triumph. I think it's the first time I ever knew I don't think anything can ever beat me. If I survived that, I can survive anything. I told myself. I think also this comes with what people call narratives. Narratives help people process grief and terrifying situations in their life. It could be like mantras, like love and light, or I can do this, I'll beat cancer. And there's a lot of military jargons in cancer, battle, war,
Do you believe on those?
I used to, but nowadays I don't. I believe, there's a demarcation, especially when I went to India. I started to see cancer as an ally instead of an enemy that I needed to combat. That helped me in terms of the pain, the grief I had, that I had lost the prime years of my life, that it had eaten into me, it had eaten into the resources in our family. So I when I thought about that, I was bitter. I was bitter at myself. I was bitter at life. I was bitter at a lot of people. I was bitter at my parents, my dad, who I didn't know. There's a lot of things, a lot of questioning of who I am. It puts me into this space where I'm asking myself, who the fuck am I? Sometimes I used to stand into the mirror and my bones are protruding. The hair has now fallen off completely. You know very well something is eating you. And you're wondering, this is a husk. I think when you pass through a arrow, you see them burning husks of rice. It's brown, it's a brown heap. And then the rice is probably taken to another place or packed in very neat packages for people to eat. I used to imagine, so what happened to my rice? What happened to the nutritious part, the dreamy, the one who wanted to have a PhD by 28? Because when I went to college, two things happened. my grandmother gave me an executive pen that belonged to my grandfather. This pen was very vital. I used to admire it when I used to see it on top of my grandfather's study table. So when she gave it to me, it was very symbolic. I told her, just like I used to tell my grandfather, I'll have a PhD. You didn't have a PhD, I'll have a PhD, and I'll bring it home by under 30. And I knew it. If things wouldn't have happened the way it happened, I would have achieved that. But now, because school was very important to me, it is disrupted. I'm forced to defer. I am removed, literally removed from my support system. My friends, I no longer relate with them when they go for funkies or they go for rave. That back then they used to call it rave. I don't know whether they still call it that. Okay, the rave wodunda. Oh, is he enda? So they're living a life that is very alien from yours, and it's not their fault. It's not yours either. It's just that it's the reality you have to deal with. So there's a lot of, I think what I call it's an existential dread or questioning. You don't just question who you are as a person, but who you are as an existence. At some point, one of the bitterness that I held was the fact that I shouldn't have been born. One, because I was born of a young mother. I do not know the totality of my history. I do not know about it. But sometimes I used to imagine, did this cancer come from the side of my father, who I don't know? Or am I being punished for being born out of wedlock? These things, they could be very irrational, but those are the narratives that I was telling you. When you're processing your grief or you're processing your disease, you're kind of trying to understand, put things into perspective, the way you understand them against the backdrop of the history before. So that happened a lot. And it was a back and forth, like I told you. Back and forth comes usually because cancer comes with a lot of admissions, comes a lot with ER visits, outpatients, comes a lot with scans and tests, very many of them, comes a lot with pricking and prodding into your body, comes a lot with therapy. I went into therapy during this time because I realized if I don't do something about this, it's going to consume me. Even though I used to believe that I am my own therapist. Yes, I believe that these people exist to guide. But the major work, actually the work, is yours as a person. It's individual. It's very personal. It's kind of like there's a place where people can take you. People can escort you. Beyond that, ni wewe na Mungu yako. That's what they say. That's what they say. It's funny because one thing, I have moved away from religion. I don't believe in God. But it's funny because my family, I was raised as a very strong Christian boy. And I'm scared to tell my family that I actually don't believe in God. And it has happened.
Don't you believe in God?
I think I usually attribute it to reading a lot. Reading exposed me to a lot of perspectives. And so I started to...
Somebody surely created the liver.
With what? Clay?
That's the most important.
Yes.
That's the most. It's a bit complicated.
Yeah, those things used to fascinate me.
It can't. Do you think the liver could have come out of the
Big Bang? No.
The Big Bang theory?
No. That's the thing.
Or the brain. I imagine that you've looked at the brain. Mm-hmm. You've read about the brain. You've read about the liver. Yeah. And the kidney, the purification that goes there.
It's a work of art.
Yeah.
Masterpiece.
Even our sexuality. Well, even if there is no God, there is an energy.
There is something.
There is an energy that created it.
Exactly.
For people, one of the things that I think about religion, Christianity, they give you an easy answer.
And I didn't want that. And also because
and when you go ahead and pursue this answer, this answer relentlessly, you get into an abyss, you get into a hole. Yes. Because it is easy to say that we were created by God. It is very difficult to say no to it and then go looking for your answers
and you don't find
and come out with it.
Yes.
I think that's the problem. But anyway, let's go to when you were told that you're going to die.
This comes later.
When?
Something happens. Like I told you, it was a back and forth. So between 2014, I go back to school. I push to second year and third year. I was hoping for third year, but now I had to defer again because my cancer is becoming more aggressive. I can no longer attend classes. And you see classes, you have to attend 75%. And also you have to do CAT before you do the main exam. So I couldn't do that alongside my treatment. I struggle. One, now I am removed completely. Most of my year colleagues have graduated. I'm alone now. The people behind me, I don't relate with them as much. They're just basically colleagues. I used to stay with sometimes my high school son, call them. A high school son called Rogers. I used to come and visit me a lot. But there's a time now I couldn't even pay my rent, so I became homeless. But also I'm ashamed because I figured this person has been there for me constantly. My friends have been there for me a lot, and I figured, so now how do I survive? I think back then my friend Benzo and Gideon had moved. They were living in Umoja and Doni. So I stayed with Ben for a few weeks and then moved to Gideon's place for another 3 weeks or a month. But then I realized now I've exhausted all my friends, all the ones I know, the ones I'm comfortable staying with, because now they had known my story. And I'm like, now, I remember the day I left Benzo's place and went to, I had a clinic that day. I had this very heavy trench coat that belonged to my grandfather. It was bought in the 60s. So you can imagine how heavy it was.
Yeah, I remember my grandfather had one like
yes.
that. It's extremely heavy.
Yes.
In fact, when you say it is heavy, people don't understand how heavy it is. My grandfather used to give it to me,
yes,
but I couldn't walk.
You can't. It's very heavy. And you can imagine how my friend, I was looking like an insect, like on Gogo inside.
Yeah, I remember.
So that day, it rained a lot. And I remember, I think they had already built the footbridge that goes over, passing by Central Police Station into University of Nairobi. I remember standing there with a brown paper bag of medicine that had been given. I couldn't use them because they were zililowa maji. But there, not very far from there, these street boys were simmering in fire around the fireplace. And they're telling, bro, kuja. I'm like, hey. This is kwa set up, because Choco, you can't trust them up front, but they seemed kind. So this is how I knew a boy called Moas. Moas used to collect peppers, and then they used to take them to Chandarana in industrial area, so that they could be converted to maybe tissue or books or something. This is what they used to tell me. So Moas was also I think he was very smart. He was a very smart boy. He used to collect all these peppers. Sometimes he would do the crossword and he would tell me, hey, Prof, he used to call me Prof. Prof, kuja nimakie. Like, yeah. There's this time in March 2015 to go downtown. It's raining. Nairobi is foggy. It's cold. I met with this beautiful lady, very brown. And she had very, very thick white fur. Trench coat.
It's amazing that even when you're dying, you can still see
dying is beautiful, man.
Men and women, man. Oh my God. Scent of a woman. Anyway, let's laugh about this story. Big ups to Moaz and big ups to everybody that has been there for you. Yeah.
So this chick, I didn't know that a Twilight lady could be very philosophical. She tells me that for people who I get to see, who become my clients, they're always running from something or searching for something. So what are you searching for? To the short, yes, so I was very shy about it, of course, like, being asked up front like that.
She was, you wanted to go for a shout?
No, I didn't.
She was soliciting money from you by asking you to go for a shot, and then of course you can pay. Yeah.
Yes. I tell her no, but I offer her, I had a packet of potato crisps. I offer her, you can have a bite. And so we talk, and then she tells me I knew because I come from Kitui, we laugh about it. And Moas comes. Moas approaches from, there used to be, this guy is a disabled guy, a person with disability, who used to sell sweets and at the hip of Ambassador Hotel. It is no longer there. It used to be called John Mutai. So John Mutai was the first person who welcomed me as a homeless person. I used to sleep behind his wheelchair. He was a PWD. I used to sleep behind his wheelchair as he sold his sweets at night. So Mwas comes anasema Johnny amekutafuta sana, amesema umemlenga for days, inafaa umuone, amekuja ameleta kahawa. So he gives me kahawa, and then I don't know what happens when a fellow man knows that you guys are vibing with a chick, they excuse you. That is if they're sensible. So he knew something was happening between me and this chick. So that night I was so sick. I remember
you are fully blown into cancer, and you were homeless, and sleeping in the streets.
Yes. So I remember, and the thing is, it's very funny. I was not homeless really, and this is the other thing with being homeless. Many people say that when you're homeless, you don't have, like, when the debate that was raging around about the housing bill and all the housing levy. When people say you're homeless, people imagine that you do not have somewhere. But from what I've realized, even from when I was talking to Akina Mwas, even this chick, this Jasmine lady, I realized that these people have places. They have places that they call home. It's just that for me...
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Like, she says she's from Kitui. She was raised by her grandmother. Mwas ran away from home because the stepmother was very cruel to him. And for me, I feared going home and breaking the news about my cancer.
But your mother already came.
No, being aggressive. It wasn't aggressive before.
You, at this point, have you been told that you're terminal?
No, not yet. But I felt like it was approaching, knowing that I had read a lot about cancer. So I remember this particular day that I was climbing the stairs. Mwas was taking me to one of the rooms, Ukoju. And he told me, I've paid for the room. Tomorrow I'll come pick you in the morning. But I told him tomorrow.
Mwas is the fellow homeless fella.
Yeah, tomorrow I'm going home. Bro, kesho mi naenda home kukufa. That is the exact words I told him. Acha hizo bana, uta manage, when he fighter, when he champ. I was like, nah, I don't feel good at all. But he tells me, yes, I'm just actually nitakuwa tu around. We chill, nitakuwa tu around, and then tomorrow we'll see what happens. Tomorrow I'm determined. I remember I had 1,200 bob. Nikabook Eldoret Express. It was rusty. Nilikuwa nimelipa 750 to Sondu, to Kisumu. Then I would connect to Sondu with the rest of the money. But I gave Mwas. I remember pressing this old 100 bob note on his hand and giving him the trench coat. As they waved, it kind of felt like I'd become a part of their family for this brief moment that I was with them. It was barely 3 weeks, but it was both relieving and sad, because how could strangers, people you've never met in your life before, be so kind to you? And in fact, they are street kids who have the reputation for their abrasive behavior, and they were so kind to me. But I went home with what I usually call a silent DNR. I never wanted treatment, even when I knew there were options that were available, even if not locally, but somewhere, maybe in India, like people used to do around that time. But I went home to die. I didn't die. At least I'm here, still speaking with you, but I didn't die.
Yeah, we didn't tell them that you now lectured at Nairobi University.
Yes, I'm an assistant lecturer at University of Nairobi.
Oh, man, that is a whole lot of story. I want us to rush to when you're told that you are terminal.
Yes. I went home. I stayed there waiting to die. There's a lot of rumors around. When you're dying, people know, and you also feel it in your body. There's a sort of resignation that surges through your body. There's also, not really a resignation, but also acceptance. Sort of an acceptance. It washes over you. You know, you're happy. You're good to go.
I haven't felt it. The closest I have felt for me is that I'm going to be amputated. When I had problems with my feet, that was the biggest fear for me, that I'm going to lose my legs. And the other fear was that if I lose my legs, how am I going to live my life? You see, I can not imagine losing my legs and losing my hands and losing everything. That I have never imagined.
Yes.
And what happens when you, the resignation part of it, how does it manifest itself? because I imagine that you no longer want to eat, you no longer want to read, because it's futility. Whatever you want to do,
vain.
Yeah,
It's vain. It was hard, but I think what actually accelerated that resignation or acceptance on the flip side was the fact that I had processed denial. I'd already accepted the cancer as a part of me. So I was no longer dealing with denial. I was in the acceptance stage. Acceptance, most people feel like it's very good for healing, but it can also be very bad for healing. Because when you accept and then it becomes futile to even attempt to eat. I remember I was so thin, I couldn't eat on my own. It's my old lady who used to wash me. And it was even worsened when one day an old lady died. A neighbor of ours died, and people thronged our home because they thought it was me. It was that apparent. So I knew, kumbe, it's not just me who's seeing that thing. People are seeing it and they're expecting it. I would have a convulsion, and people would, my grandmother would call from down. Our home is at the foot of a hill. She'd call, hey, okay, baby Rodala. It was like, I couldn't. I was just in a dreamy state. The only thing that saved me is when I went there uphill with the cows never returned home. So when they were searching for the cows, they were also searching for me. They found me there in Mizirai. The cows were surrounding me. One I had just given birth was licking on my forehead. Then they took me. I remember when they took me to Nyabondo. Nyabondo said, we can't handle him. Then they took me to Sigowet. Sigowet is not very far from Sondu. Then they took me to MTRH in Eldoret. So from Eldoret, that's when now I am returning to treatment. Remember, I was not taking any medication. I was experiencing the pain. When you ask me how it feels, you see, there's something called thudno. When you have, how do you call it? Numbness in your body. But this I felt like somebody was pricking my, because this is where the liver is, was pricking inside with a needle. It was so painful. And
pain machalonat? Is a stabbing pain?
It's a piercing pain. It's like somebody sewing you without anesthesia. Like it's kind of so. And
can you localize it?
No, I could at some point, but at some point you would feel it everywhere. You feel like you have two different heads. You feel like something is wrong with your leg. When it starts, it's localized on where the liver is, but then as time goes, well, because you've not intervened, it spreads throughout your whole body. It's like your whole body is a mass of pain. So
the biology, the body is trying to fight it.
Yeah,
Does the body try to fight pain to survive?
Yes. Yes. And one of the things the body does to survive is it shuts down. So when I eat, it goes off. It's actually, the body is warning you. The body has an internal logic, an alarm. It warns you. You need to eat. You need to do this. You need to drink water. If you don't drink water, you're going to die. You start having hallucinations. It's kind of like you've smoked weed, but I'm wondering which weed have I smoked.
Hallucination is basically an alarm.
Yes, it's an alarm. I had frequent dizziness and blurry vision. You would just fall, and my grandmother would be dragging me. Good thing I had lost weight, so she would at least struggle with me. And then at some point, I had to move from my uncle Simba to my former bedroom in their main house, because there she could now take care of me. I had this habit of closing the door with the chapia juu and chapia chini, because I didn't want to get bothered. I didn't want her to bring food in the morning. Don't bring me food. And you see, this also coincides with the moment when my grandmother was now dealing with dementia. So sometimes she would cook even breakfast 2 times. Alisahau ulikuwa shakuletea. And yet when you're dying, you have the tendency to be very cruel. One is you believe most people on the other side of the disease do not understand you, that you are the only person who understands yourself. So you push people away. You want to be alone. You want to be consumed in your own space, and you believe nobody can understand. And maybe it is true, but it is important to not push people away, because that support system is very vital in your survival. Even if you are dying, it's still very vital. So I moved back to like I told you, from Nyabondo, Sigowet, MTRH. Then I come back from MTRH. That is where they told me. And I have
MTRH.
Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital in Eldoret. That's where they gave me the diagnosis. Actually, it's called a prognosis, that you have 3 years to live. A prognosis gives a prediction, a likelihood of the advancement of your disease.
What do they base this on? Is it science?
It's science. They do a lot of tests. They see how fast and farther it has spread. They also see the general health of your vitals, your heart, your liver, your brain, just general vital sense of it. Yeah, then they draw. There's something called child park. It's a staging. It's a staging of diseases.
At what stage is this now?
It's now 3rd stage. So it's also metastasized. When a cancer has metastasized, it has spread to another part. So it has spread to my spleen and to my bone marrow, and it's in my blood, and now I have a stroke on my left side. So the things that you imagined or the things that you feared would happen are now happening. Now you truly know you are dying. I think that mortality clock is very. It's kind of like the government drinking a patient's uji. Something, drinking, taking life from you, like pulling a cord. I think I remember yesterday when we were talking about the analogy of a USB with the corrupt registry. It kind of felt like my body had this corrupt registry. It couldn't process life in the way it should. It had this virus eating in it, and I had reason to back it up. My body was failing. You could see it. I was not eating. I was all over hallucinating. I was isolated. But something would change along the way. I think it was around the same time I met you. I think that is the time you also published The Ghost of 1894. I'd also released an album at that time, Cures in Neurology. The funny thing about Cures in Neurology is it was an acceptance of my death. I wondered, will I get cured in my urology, in my death? Like, will death be the final rest? When people say rest in peace, is that peace achievable? Is it something that we aspire for? When you've suffered so much and you're wondering, death is the only thing that will give me respite or relief. So I wrote the album and I went to my friend Omondi Ochuka, who hosted me for the better part of 2016 as we recorded. Used to go to work, and we had a makeshift studio in the house. Used to go to work, come back, we'd record in the evening when I felt better. Yeah, and I think when I met you, that's when you were telling me, so what do we do? But now my mother has come and she's telling me, the thing is, there are a lot of things we can do, Doc. There's a lot of things we can do. We can even go to India. A lot of my friends are going to India. Even the whole of Africa, people are going to India. Why don't we try that? I was like, nah, I'm tired, Mom. I'm tired. I want to go. And I like to just think about it. So that time, she talks to Dr. Mohammed, who was at the time at Apollo Hospital in New Delhi, and they draft a quotation. A quotation is when they give you the likelihood estimation of what it would cost to treat your cancer. So I was supposed to do two phases of treatment that would amount to 4.7 million. And I'm wondering, they have sold all the cattle.
No.
Yeah, I can no longer use my mother's insurance. I am not paying for my NHIF because I used to work at Chase Bank. I'm no longer working at Chase Bank. I'm no longer doing the academic writing that I used to do back then in college. And Niko Kitako, the way you usually say. Arumo ground. What do we do? Arumo. And then it's complicated because you've asked for help a lot of times. But I remember one thing you told me, and you still tell me to date, that sometimes you have to look outside of family, because family is also the people who choose us. They also show up for us outside of our own bloodline. And it felt so compassionate coming from you, because I'd only known you through Isia Zangu, you remember? And when you starting choir, and you used to shoot, I think most of the times weddings and all that. Yeah, that is as far as we knew each other. So you telling me this?
The reason why I told you that is because when I came to Nairobi, I had a lot of faith in family. That because I had very big shots in the family, at least the extended family. in the city.
Yes.
One of them was a very big guy in the railway corporation.
Yeah.
The others that were teachers, big shots, very big people. And when I was coming to Nairobi for college, my thinking was that Jogyok Nyawe Kata.
Yeah, they'll have.
But Kanabiru Nairobi, what happened was that it didn't turn out like I thought. And at the end of the day, it is complete strangers that came through for me. And not just strangers, but people who do not even belong to my tribe. They were Kalenjins, they were Luyas, they were Kikuyus. They were far, far away from my blood relatives. And that is why for me, every time I tell people that the thing with the people is that humans always want to help. And I don't want to help people. It's very difficult to find such a person. The thing is, people are selfish, but they are very selfish to an extent.
Yeah.
And that is why when you come somewhere and you find people eating, it's very, very difficult for those people to tell you to take something.
Bile. In fact, Katako Rumo, they would even offer their plate.
Yes, they will even offer their plate. So I believe, for me, I believe in asking for help because there is always help. And the funny thing is that some people don't even know how to help people, and some people don't know how to give before you ask them to give. Yeah. So you went to India. Yeah.
I went to India courtesy. I should mention this because you were also very instrumental. You and Richie Marks and Agoro and Goofy and Traboli and Romy Swale, all this outfit of
and the gentleman who photographed you remember
Osman
him?
Masharia, yes. You will win. A very iconic photograph.
Yes. Do you have the original of that photo?
No, I don't. You have it. You should have it.
I don't have it.
Maybe if he has it.
These people want us to stop.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. They have been fidgeting for a while now. They have been fidgeting for a while. But I wonder, you can wrap up with the story of India.
Yeah.
And then after you wrap up, how did it happen in India? I think you can just mention it.
When I went to India, we had hoped that we would do the transplant, but we ended up doing a resection. It was funny because we went to India short of money. Like I had mentioned in many interviews, I've also shared this with you. Our fund drive, we will win, only managed 436,000. And we needed 4.7 million.
We raised 10%.
So we go to India. It's a foreign country. It's very far. And things are very uncertain. And half of that money, we traveled during peak time when air ticket is very costly. So half of that money has already gone to the flight. So we arrive in India, and arrive in India as an emergency case. In fact, when the plane was touching down, the ambulance was coming to pick me off. And I do not go to Apollo as I was supposed to go. I go to JP Hospital. JP is a franchise hospital in India. I go to JP and they admit me shingo upande because one, they needed a deposit. We don't have it. Or if you have it, it's very little. So while we wait for, I think the first 1 week was very uncertain. We wait for APA was supposed to chip in and give us 1.5. It would have at least given us a bargaining chip with the hospital when I was moving to Apollo. But it came later after 2 weeks, and a funny thing happened. The doctor, Dr. Chaudhary, the surgeon who was supposed to do the surgery, waived his fee, a total of 300,000 rupees. That's almost half a meter here. That added to the compassion, to the miracles that were happening in the unfolding. And like you say, I remember what he told me. Why didn't you invite me to your fund drive that we will win? I saw it later online. I was like, you should have told me. And it's people. What I've realized is there are people who do not know how to help. Or they need to know that there's agency here, that I need to help here. That's when they know, now I have a resource here, or I have a thought here that could help this gentleman. And I didn't do that. Maybe out of fear, maybe because I felt like it's a professional setting. It has to be, he comes, he does the surgery, gets his bag and goes. I didn't think that he could be compassionate to me as a stranger. So that really helped me. I stayed in India for 7 months. My mother had to come back because costs. And I remained there alone with the nurses and the doctor who used to take me around India, touring India when I felt better. Now been discharged. I was staying in the pockets. Like I told you, the pockets are kind of like Airbnbs. Yeah, so India was, I think, profound, because India is what made it possible for me to learn that a cure for cancer does not mean that the cancer is gone. A cure for cancer now has to mean that I have to accept me as myself. I have to know that you can coexist with your illness, that you can be productive, you can pursue your dreams, you can go after life. You don't have to resign. Until the very end, you still have a shot at life.
What are your dreams now as we wind down? You teach at the University of Nairobi.
Yes.
You're pursuing your master's.
Yes. I still hold it very dear. I still want to be a lead researcher in especially health economics. That's also what will constitute a better part of my dissertation. I'm also writing currently 2 books. One is a handbook for cancer survivors, and then the other is a memoir. The memoir will come first later this year. So those things have resources that I've gleaned from my journey, but also in terms of reflecting, because without intentional reflections about life, you cannot get out of it. It's nyakipu. You have to dig your hands into the dirt. That's when you bad and you sprout out of it. That is what separates you from somebody who just came into existence and lived and left. And also, this is also in terms of being compassionate with my journey. I think I have a terrific journey. It's not only sad, it's joyous too. It is a miracle. It's an inspiration. And for me to sit with it like I used to sit with it the first 4 years of my after my diagnosis, I think that's selfish.
Yeah.
I think I need to go out there and share it. I think even the things that used to be very hard for me to talk about, like, my father and my family, how I grew up with my grandparents, I find it easier to open up about it, because I've achieved a tremendous healing. I've achieved a tremendous grace, the amazing grace that my Danai loves to sing. I've learned forgiveness, even for myself, because if you do not forgive yourself, illness will be really, 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 really horrible for you. So that is in terms of looking into the future. I want to dive deeply into advocacy. I'm very passionate about teaching.
You're supposed to start a non-profit that you haven't started up to today.
Yeah, after today. I think that's also in the bucket list. So hopefully,
maybe I'll encourage you to do it, to start it so that it coincides with the launch of your book on cancer. Yesterday there's a friend of mine who is also suffering from cancer, and yesterday we were doing another funds drive to take her to another treatment, which is costing about for 300 to 400,000. And I think she's been very young in the journey. I think 1 year or thereabout. And so a lot of people, and even families that are struggling with cancer and treating it, and they need these stories to be told. The reason why I decided to sit down with you is because I feel like the interviews that you've done are very and just nuggets here and there and sound bites that the legacy media, call legacy media. So, man, big up to you. I really want to congratulate you from the bottommost part of my heart for the journey that you have gone through, that you've gone through, and I wish you well in the future.
Thank you.
The things that you want to do, the book, the launch, and you are going for the PhD. Yeah. I've also been thinking about education.
You should.
Oh,
you should open
a lot of people think that I'm an academic. Far from
and
it.
You are. Actually, I don't like the distinction that academia brings into our lives, that you have to, I spent a lot of time. In fact, you see, I spent a lot of time writing my dissertation, even when I couldn't afford the fee to do my master's degree.
Yeah.
I was writing it. I was schooling myself. And this is also what allowed my professor to actually see that this guy has a potential.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we feel this, it creates this withdrawal between the academia and the real life.
Yeah.
And yet, like for example, a friend of mine, Aguto Nagi, wrote about Osito Kale, the Benga maestro. He's called a daktari. Many musicians, even Franco people, some people call him Prof.
We have gone with you to the gentleman that is my professor friend down there.
Yes.
And he's always telling me that you are not educated.
Yeah.
That you are brilliant, all right,
dedicated.
but you are very far from being educated.
Because there is a structure.
There is a structure to it.
A framework and a philosophy.
Yeah. Anyway, we have to finish now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the longest interview I've ever done, I think. How long did it go for?
1 hour 40.
1 hour 40 minutes.
It's a lot.
Yeah, that's really.
We didn't touch on cost, but it's okay.
Of cost of
cancer care.
We are going to. We didn't even touch on insurance.
Yes, we did not. That's part of the cost.
We did not. So probably we'll do it again.
Specifically on that,
yeah. The cameras are very heated right now. They want us. They just want to go off now. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning to this episode. It's a lot that we've talked about. There are lots of families out there that are suffering from cancer, and they need to listen to this. They would need to watch this, and for them to watch this, it will need you to share the video, comment on the video, and subscribe to the YouTube channel Dialogues with Jekero. So I would kindly ask you that for this channel to be big, to reach as many people as possible, it would be important for you to subscribe and hit on that notification bell, and let us grow these bold conversations together. Until another episode, thank you very much and ciao.